Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stronger Together podcast, partnering with Identity Automation to highlight safety in schools, best practices, and hear from leaders in the field. And for me, my name is Matthew Joseph, and I am an active district administrator, and I love to learn what others are doing with practices, with systems, and really learn from each other, because in our field, collaboration is part of what we do, and working together makes us better and stronger as we work together to make this happen. So today, I am thrilled to welcome in Matt Roper and Karla Tipton to the Stronger Together podcast, partnering with Identity Automation. So Matt and Karla, thank you so much for joining us. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself, talk about the work that you do in Cherokee County Schools, and maybe just a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing. So Matt, we'll start with you.
Hey, man, thanks. This is Matt Roper. I've been with the Cherokee County School District now for about 11 years. So that's pretty exciting. But over my time here, I've had an opportunity to see the network, oversee the network, cybersecurity, and our data center infrastructure. So I've had a lot of different diverse experience. And of course, a big part of cybersecurity strategy here is identity and access management. So that's one of the that's one of the things that, just about every single day somebody has to interact with. So you want to make sure it's a very seamless experience for, not only staff and the students as well.
Sure. And nice to have you with us too, Karla. I'd love to hear from you and work that you're doing, both in your role and work that you enjoy doing.
Okay, Karla Tipton. I am the Director of Enterprise Systems here in Cherokee County. I have been with the district for almost 31 years. I've had a lot of roles. I started out as a teacher. I've been an assistant principal. Then I moved to the technology department, and I've held the roles of a network analyst, a systems analyst, a supervisor, and now director. I work a lot in the identity access management space, and I work closely with Matt, with him being security. I'm looking at more of the life cycle management of accounts, and just making it more streamlined and secure. I also work a lot with all of our online systems, Office 365. We also use that with identity access management, Azure, and servers and storage. So that's my role here in Cherokee County.
No, and that's wonderful. And I love hearing that coming up through classroom and in district leadership. And, maybe I'm just biased because that was my journey coming up through an elementary school teacher and elementary principal before kind of dabbling between the curriculum side of the house and the technology side of the house. And I think bringing those perspectives and working, so closely with Matt, it really feeds that knowledge and supports your districts and the work that you both brought up identity and access management in both of your introductions. And for those who are just learning about that, how has it been impactful for you and why is it important? Really looking at your different roles, I'd love to hear from each of you.
Okay. Well, for me, I want it to be a really good experience for staff and students. We really had a fractured process. Years ago, we used a different system to provision student accounts, and then we manually provisioned through PowerShell scripts our staff accounts. It was just really fractured and broken and manual process. And it got to the point where it was starting to be a security issue because, somebody would be terminated and we figure out, oh, well, their account's still active.
Right.
No one told us to disable this. We're like, okay, we have got to fix and streamline the life cycle of, from beginning to end of all of our accounts. And so that's what we used Rapid Identity for. We feel like that was the best system for us to use to do that. And we did work closely with our HR department to clean up data so we could have good data, because it starts with good data, to do a clean process, right? And we wanted to make our onboarding also for new staff members and make it easy for them, to be able to log in and set up their password and their MFA. And so we have done that with Rapid Identity. So that was my goal, is to clean it up, streamline it, and also make it secure.
Yeah, and that's great. And I know, Matt, in your role, I had a chance last interview to talk to Dr. Tillman about security and the network. And I know that's a big piece of what you do. And how is that system supporting you in your work?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that is overlooked is, how remote access into internal systems. And I think prior to a few years ago, not a whole lot of people focused on like VPN access and, maybe a good way to secure that. And so one of the things that, we're able to set up because of the tool set that we have is a multi-factor authentication for
Hmm.
those remote access connections. So that was one really big win for us is adding that functionality and creating and the good thing was, onboarding folks to use that solution was really easy and seamless because it's the same experience that they're used to using, on campus. So it wasn't like we had to stand up a new separate system just to do that one function. You could just have the same user experience, user interface, both on and off campus. So, that was huge. And obviously, Karla mentioned the fact that, depending on what type of user you are, you're going to have a lot of privileged access. So being
Sure.
able to fully automate that end to end. So if employees, like when employees onboard and when employees offboarded, you want to make sure that it happens, fairly quickly because you don't want to leave access to systems open longer than they need to be. So
Sure. And Carl, I'm going to come back to you for a minute and dive a little bit deeper. I'm going to push you on one of the pieces. You talked about data cleanup a few times. Can you share some examples? Like, what does that look like for those who are either new to the system or really need to do that and want to look into identity automation and access management as a solution? Like, can you give a couple examples to highlight that?
Oh, sure. So, we use Active Directory, for
Okay.
users and groups and so forth. It's it's got over 20 years of data, right? A lot of cell data, and really,
Sure.
it's not so much users as it is groups. Groups
Okay.
were a disaster. They were just a mess. Thousands of groups. I'm like, we've got to clean this up. So
Sure.
and it forced our hand. It's always something that you say, oh, I need to clean that up, and you put it off. Well, this really forced our hand to, hey, we've got to do this now. So we have the correct groups, and it wasn't painful because you use these groups not only maybe for distribution lists or for mail-enabled security, and so you had to go around and also check, okay, where is this group being used? Where do I need to make sure that I have the correct security on files and so forth. So it took the summer to really to clean that up, but it has made such a big difference because the groups in Rapid were able to do dynamic queries and pull in job titles or job codes. And so when people get onboarded, they get to be a member of the groups that they need to be in. And we're not having to do that as a manual process. Also, we did work with HR a lot too to make sure that our job codes and job titles were cleaned up and consistent. And that's important as well.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a lot of, especially as we start to talk about state data or state testing or reporting, like having those codes really cleaned up and efficient. And because in our roles, you don't want to hit send on that state data and come back with a lot of red marks like, all right, and clean this up and this doesn't match. And here are 400 errors and like, here we go again. So I think having that is really helping that efficiency. So thank you for that. And Matt, I'm going to dive in on one of the things that you said too. You were talking about managing identities. And what are some of the policies that you put in place to make sure that you can manage identities, student identity, staff identity?
The good thing is Karla kind of mentioned that we have like really clean source data, and I think that's like kind of the key there is making sure that everybody, no matter what their role is, and keeps the data as clean as possible. So a lot of the
Sure.
entry happens at the school level, so they want to make sure that when new students are enrolled, there's no errors in regards to that. So that way, that when the student logs in, it's easy and seamless. Same goes for staff. Our HR department does a really good job at keeping up with staff data, validating they are who they are ultimately. So that way, when they're entered into our HRMS, the data that comes out of there and gets fed into Rapid Identity is accurate. So that was key, is kind of getting it to the point where, everybody understood the importance of having a really clean source data. Because, if you have garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. So ultimately, you want to make sure that it's
Sure.
possible.
And you mentioned your team, and you mentioned HR department. Like, who is managing that work, or is it just kind of cross department, or are you like the point person that manages this and then kind of delegate the work?
So
I
that's
think,
like
wouldn't you, Matt? I mean, it is. It's our boss. We have Matt and I share the same boss.
Okay.
And he works closely with HR, and I think, and we do a lot of cross-divisional collaboration with that.
So now you've said you've been using this platform for a while. And when we talk about policies and governance of this work for new districts that are starting out or who are looking for a solution like identity automation, what would be some considerations that you would share to those districts looking out to maybe come on board, or the need for something to clean up data, manage identities? What would be some of the considerations we should look for?
Oh, wow. So I think one of our biggest things that we did was that instead of rapid identity tying directly into our systems, we have a data warehouse. And so we pull the information from our student information system and our HR system into a SQL table. And so we're able to manipulate it a little bit better. And we do have some developers on staff and our boss too that is able to pull that data that we need and manipulate it in a way that when it gets to Rapid, we can do a lot of cool stuff, like group memberships and so forth that are actually in the SQL table, and they get pulled into Rapid.
So I'm gonna ask again, kind of giving recommendations. How would you recommend organization approach roster management?
Rostering like third party, or like
bringing in students. How would you manage those rosters? What kind of tools that you have in place now to do that work? Not just clean the data, but bring in new classes, bring in new courseworks from the high school maybe, or different types of rostering.
We pull in. I'm trying to think of what we pull in. So students are really simple.
Okay.
We have a very simple. We collect, first, last name, homeroom teacher. We give them an email address. Of course, their student ID. Students are very straightforward, and their group memberships are minimal. We don't pull in class schedules or anything like that with our identity access management.
Okay.
Schedules in there that we do that in our student information system.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of looking at some recommendation. I'm guessing that starts at registration. So I think your team must work very closely with registration to make sure the data that they're collecting fits into the work that you're doing.
Right. And like I said, staff is more complex. Students are very simple, first, last name, homeroom teacher. It is very straightforward. Student ID number, email address. That's really pretty much all we are pulling in from students.
Okay. And when we talk about data, and really for both of you, how much data should organizations collect and share in identity access management? Like what would you say is all encompassing in there?
Students, like I said, minimal. You just need enough to to get by here. We staff, we share a little bit more. You can see, of course, somewhere it's a location of where they're at. We have a directory in Rapid Identity, which is really great.
Okay.
So a teacher can go and what is that teacher I talked to at that school? And then she can go look. Oh, there's that teacher. This is what they teach. This is the school that they're at, and this is their email address. So it's very minimal. And students obviously don't see the directory, but it's good for our employees to be able to see that information. So it is minimal. It's not. I would not say that it is a lot of PI at all.
Now, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, just bring in only what you need to bring in. There's really no reason to bring in things like, social security numbers, things of that nature. You just want to bring in as much as you need to get the job done ultimately. So,
oh no, that's great. And we've been talking about, IAM for a lot of this. Like, for those who are new to that, what are some of the tools that you use with identity automation?
From like within Rapid,
Yes.
we do. Okay, so we do have we use MFA for staff.
Multi-factor.
Multi-factor authentication. We have several methods that they can choose from to do multi-factor authentication. It's very simple to set up, and it's easy for them to change their password. Of course, that's security as well, and
Sure.
And we don't make them do it on campus, but that they are at an IP address that is not our campus, they have to perform MFA before they can have any access. We try to bring in as many systems as we can to do single sign-on via Rapid as well. So that way they're not having a double authentication with another system.
Sure.
Once they log into Rapid, if they hit that, and it's we have single sign-on set up, it just passes them through. So we try to make that simple as well, and for students too, for staff and students. We also use the GoView in Rapid, which is a portal.
Okay.
It has all of the applications on it, and we tailor it for employees. We also have it for high school students, middle school students, and elementary school students, and we even have one for our technology department. And so that way you can tailor applications. You can actually restrict too on which grade levels can see certain applications. So that has been really, people have loved that.
And did you say that was called the GoView, just for our listeners? Okay. And Matt, just every day you open the news or you read something on a new technology popping up or a new way to get around the system or something, so usually not good news. How do you keep up with this evolving technology in the work that you do? What are some of the processes that you have in place? How do you use, the tools that we've been talking about today to really support your district as a whole? And then, of course, your learners and individuals using your technology with how fast this field is changing.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to keep up with everything.
Sure.
Catch 99% of the stuff, and you're probably going to be okay. But ultimately, that's kind of why we started investing more in the security stack that comes with Rapid Identity. So one of the main things the last couple of years we've invested in was Shield ID. So it's just really like you just think of it as like something that can kind of safeguard before somebody gets into your system. It's something that sits in front of the identity management platform. It can help block, sources that are known to be bad. So, there's a reputation list that's just kept throughout the industry that they leverage to block, known bad sources.
Mm-hmm.
You can block specific countries. So if you want to only allow your users to log in from the United States, for example, you can only allow them to log in from the United States. And there's various other, technologies that they leverage when it comes to blocking things through Shield ID. So that's a really great thing to do because it's constantly updated and, it's based off of industry standard controls. So that's great there. And then they also had a feature that we invested in called Safe ID, which essentially just checks to see if your credentials have been part of a data breach,
Right,
of that nature, and then you can enforce policies based on if that is the case. So if it isn't a data breach, let's have you change your password, and then start enforcing multi-factor until you actually do that. Things like that. So it allows you to kind of be a little bit more proactive instead of reactive.
No, and I think that's important, especially staying ahead of it. And I think also being proactive. One of the things I wanted to ask is where I've had the most success with working with solution providers is that collaboration. And I know you have a wonderful customer success manager. And how does that work, that collaboration? So you're talking about the evolving technology, and Karla, you're talking about data cleanup. How's that work with connecting with your customer service team at Identity Automation?
Well, it's always great because we're always up to date on the latest of what's coming out with Rapid, and so we can plan ahead. New features and so forth. So
Sure.
And anytime we have an issue, or there's something new we want to tackle, hey, we're looking at trying to do this, and we can always get hooked up with the right person to help us with our thought process and how we would like to do, a certain task. So that's really great. We're always on the cutting edge, or,
Yeah.
Hey, we'll try it, I can't wait to try this. And so it's nice. And the training too, that's available as well.
Okay.
So there's online training courses that we are taking. And I've gone through a couple. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know I could do that. That's great. So there's things that I've learned too by doing the training.
No, and I think that's important as the field evolves, is that having that partnership is important. And one of the things that you said there, Karla, and I want to throw it out to both of you, like, oh, this is new, or like you're excited to find something that's new. What do you see? Put your, like, I'm going to see the future hat on and advise us. Like, what do you see as trends moving forward with identity access management, things that you're going to want to see coming next as your field expands, as learning expands? So really, what are some of the things you see coming forward, and what could be maybe some challenges?
Oh, wow. Challenges, definitely. I would think it's just, there's always somebody out there that wants to hack, right?
Sure.
You're trying to keep up, and your hackers are they're in our district. We have about 42,000 of them, and so just keeping a step ahead of them is always a challenge. And the evolving technologies with identity access management and with Rapid, all the security that they're developing that we can use to prevent that is that's great. I mean, I think that's always ever evolving. But it is definitely a challenge to try to keep up with it. But it's nice to have a company that sees that out there and that is focused
Sure.
on K-12, and that recognizes that we do need to get. I mean, we got 42,000 Social Security numbers that have never been used.
Right.
Yes, everybody would love to get their hands on them. So anything that we can do to protect them is is what we want to do. So.
Yeah, I think, the things that I worry about for future anyway is not really worry about it, but just know it's a reality. As we're moving more away from having a password to passwordless authentication. So how do you make that transition at some point? How do you make that easier for end users? There's some ways built into Rapid today. You can use QR codes, pictograph, things of that nature. That's something you could use.
Oh, nice.
That's kind of like a great start, but depending on what user group you have, let's just say it's one of our network technicians, for example. Rapid also has the ability to allow you to use FIDO2 keys, like a hardware security token. So you can not only require a password, or if we're going to move passwordless, you can get a hardware key and also a TOTP code. So just multi-factor, multi-levels of authentication. And you can kind of cater that to the specific user groups. So students would
Sure.
have a simple version of passwordless authentication, and then our enterprise technicians would have that more complex version. And I think what's key for us is this year we're kind of starting to heavily adopt the CIS Top 8 team as our critical security controls as our cybersecurity framework. And the good thing is Control 5 and Control 6 really align perfectly with identity access management. So, if that's something that as more districts are aware of the need to establish a cybersecurity culture and framework, this particular solution aligns very well with at least a couple of the controls that we've, standardized on in Cherokee.
No, that's awesome. And it's been so amazing to hear about your journey, your work, the way you've been using all of these tools. So I just have two more questions, and I really want to frame this for, new districts. You talk about it with the wealth of knowledge and experience that you have. You've been deeply connected with the partnership, and I'd love to hear your advice and share with prospective, partners out there. What advice would you give organizations that are looking to start and to use IAM service, and how would that look? Maybe one of the things that you really liked from the beginning, think back when you start, and maybe one or two things to avoid that you look back and like, we could have been further ahead if we didn't do certain thing?
I would say have a close relationship with your human resources department. Understand how they use the data, how the system works, what they're pulling in before you get started, so you know what you're looking for. And also with your student information system as well, even though it's not as involved, know how that data is entered, what you can do to pull that in and make it seamless, or make it better. Suggestions. Hey, instead of this, can we have this? This would be good for us, and work with them and understand their systems. I think is a key as well.
Yeah, no, I love that, because it really brings in cross department, like everybody is part of this data, and that, really looking at that information. I think that's critical. How about in your seat, Matt? What are some of the things maybe that you found as a benefit, or maybe something to avoid for districts if they come on board, join, start their journey, something early stages to say, avoid this?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely what's key is, just establish standards for capturing data. So what you're going to put into the different systems where your source data resides. So, we've basically formatted it to where, the users of those systems have like fields that they fill out that are completely in line with what we actually need. So that's good. Get standards there. Make sure you have a process in place to do that. And I would say, maybe avoid trying to bite off one and you can chew. Don't go all in with everything. Like, don't just like go full bore. I mean, yes, MFA is important, but don't do that on top of, creating workflows for like automated password resets. Like, just try to just start off and have a plan. Like, just literally lay out like a roadmap that says, all right, this is where we would like to be in the end. From let's like kind of work backwards. So what do we need to do, and what are our timelines to implement, different milestones? Don't try to do it all at once, because I feel like if you try to do it all at once, it's going to not only, overwhelm the staff that has to support that, but two, it's going to probably end up frustrating your users because you're just throwing too much at them at once. So really try to just take your time and be very intentional with that.
That makes so much sense. I'm just going to pick up on the last question. Last thing that you said, where you're saying is throwing so much at somebody, making sure you don't bite off more than you can chew, as you said. But talking about that, when you're saying putting it out to staff and students, when you make that shift, what are some of the things to make sure to communicate to staff and students that you're implementing the identity access management? Because you talked about multi-factor, you talked about different password types. What are some things that we make sure to new districts coming on board that they communicate to the users?
Oh wow, we work closely with our instructional technology department within our division, and in our LMS they created a course of what. Oh wow! For teachers, because we give teachers access into Rapid to see their classes and to also see their school, and to change students' passwords if needed, or to reprint a QR code, for a student. So they have all of the training on there. So a teacher can go to our LMS and go to the Rapid ID training and learn what they need to know in about 10 minutes.
Wow.
I thought that was very important.
And then two, we have the opportunity to, get in front of administrative staff at like principals meetings, leadership meetings, so we can kind of like train the trainer, essentially, kind of make them aware of that through in-person meetings. We have like a weekly email that goes out to all of our staff as well. So they, you just kind of like reiterate that over and over and over again, like, hey, this is coming. Here's the link to the resources to help you self-service train, what have you. So ultimately just get ahead of it as much as you can, communicate as much as possible, pick those people in the school that are a little bit more technically inclined, get them on board and help them, advocate for you, and make sure that whenever it does go live, that it's really pretty much pain-free and frictionless as possible.
No, I love that high level of communication. I love hearing about, the teachers supporting students, the teachers supporting each other, educators supporting each other. It's not just the classroom teachers. I think that's critical, and I truly appreciate you, coming on, sharing your experiences, sharing your knowledge and roadmap to make this successful. You're sharing a successful ecosystem, and I also love that you were able to really talk to those districts that are just starting out and how to get on board in some of those successes as well. So Matt and Karla, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate the time.
You're welcome. And for all of those out there who are listening or watching, make sure to continue to tune in as we continue to highlight districts and leaders who are really deep into this work and highlighting that partnership with identity automation to make our environments safe and fruitful for all of our staff, educators, and learners as well. So Matt and Karla, have a great rest of the year. And thanks again for coming on, and for all of you out there watching, continue to tune in.